All right, hey there. So Abby and we've booted up our decks that we've built in the Pokemon custom set that you hopefully saw in the intro video.
Yeah.
So if you haven't, definitely go back and check that because we'll be talking about the cards that are in our decks right now, and it might be helpful if you know the mechanics and some of the stuff like that. So real quickly, we'll just go over the two decks that Abby and I will be playing. First, we'll be starting with Abby's deck.
My favorite deck, might I add.
Yes, because again, like we said in that video, Abby and I have drafted this set hundreds of times, and we both kind of have our favorite archetypes, and this is one of Abby's favorites. So, Abby, why don't you just...
It is my favorite.
It is, okay. It is her favorite. Abby, what is this deck?
It's Bugs and Fire.
Right, Bugs and Fire. So it's a green and red, slightly splash black deck that uses bug types, like Caterpie here. And again, bug type, when this creature enters the battlefield, you get a 1/1 bug. And fire types, like Charmander here. When it enters the battlefield, it deals damage to your opponent equal to its power. So real quickly, why don't we just go over the cards in the deck so that way when they come up in the match, people will be able to know what they are. So first we have, what's this, Abby?
It's Arcanine.
Arcanine. So it's an 8 mana cost, 6/6, trample, fire type, so it deals 6 damage when it comes in, and it has evolution for Growlithe.
It's a big, beautiful fatty.
Right, and of course we do have Growlithe in the deck as well, which is just kind of a smaller version of Arcanine. 5 mana, 3/2, trample, when it comes into play, deals 3 damage.
Isn't it just a smaller version by definition?
Basically, yeah. So that was kind of a design choice that went into the evolutions, but we can talk more about that later. Anyway, let's talk about the rest of the cards. We have a Caterpie, like we saw before. We, of course, have a Charizard, which we saw in the video.
Yeah, I would not be playing this deck if Charizard wasn't in it.
Of course. And then we have Charmander, like we saw before. Charmeleon, of course, the in-between of Charmander and Charizard. Growlithe. And then a Hitmonlee. I think we saw that in the intro as well. It's a fighting type, so when it comes into play, you may have it fight a creature if you want.
Which is awesome.
Why is it awesome?
Because I mean, if you have a lot of fat little guys and you're trying to get through it, but there's one big fatty on the other end that's trying to that you can't attack through, then you can just wipe them away with Hitmonlee.
Yeah, so it's a decent removal spell. Usually more removal spell than a creature.
Yeah.
Then we have Kakuna, bringing out the bugs part of the Bugs and Fire deck. So Kakuna has Death Touch and Bug type, and it also gives bug creature tokens you control Death Touch.
Lethal.
Right, so it makes kind of being defensive easier because all your guys have Death Touch, and it also makes getting in with them easier because nobody wants to block those Death Touch things.
Yeah, I'm not touching that. So
then next we have Mankey, who's one of the red and green common cards, kind of a premier red and green common. It says Haste and Fighting type, and it's a 3/2. So it can...
Ballin'.
Yes, so it comes down, kills a blocker, potentially, and then gets in for damage. So very, very strong. Next up we have Metapod, who's similar to Kakuna in that it grants a bonus to all your bug creatures. It gives all of them +1/+1.
Which is great. If you have both the Metapod and the Kakuna out at once, oh, it's so sweet.
Right, then you have an army of 2/2 Death Touchers at least.
Oh.
Then we have one of Abby's favorite cards in the deck.
Oh, yeah.
Moltres, a mythic rare. Very nice Moltres impression. It costs 9 mana, which is a lot, but it is very powerful.
It's worth it.
So it has Fire type, of course, so it comes down, deals 6 damage, equal to its power. And it also has the ability of whenever a creature deals damage to an opponent, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So it kind of has that Resurrection Phoenix ability. So it automatically gets one back when it deals damage with its Fire type, and if you ever hit your opponent, then you just keep resurrecting creatures into your hand.
You're good.
Alright, next up we have Paris, who has Bug type and Grass type. So he looks kind of innocuous, but he's really good at powering out, Moltres faster, Metapod faster, so that's how the Grass types help. And speaking of more Grass types, we have Parasect, who grants Grass type to all of your bugs.
Oh.
So you can definitely get out, Moltres and Charizard a lot faster with the help of Parasect. Then we have Primeape, who's basically just a bigger version of Mankey.
Oh god.
Haste.
So good.
Yes, comes down, kills a blocker, gets in for a ton of damage.
And normally he stays down.
Quite often if he kills a 2/2 or a 2/3 or something. And then we have the reason for the Black Splash, Venomoth, which has Flying, Bug type, and Poison type. And again, Poison type says that whenever this creature attacks, the defending player loses 1 life. And it also gives all your bug creatures Flying and Poison type. So that means you have an army of bugs, suddenly they're all flying, and they attack, the opposing opponent loses a life. So it can deal a lot of damage very quickly. It's because 7 mana for a 3/3 flyer might seem like a lot at first, but not only is it creating a 1/1 when it comes into play, but it gives your whole army a boost potentially.
Exactly.
Then we have Venonat, which is kind of just a smaller version of that without flying. And we have Weedle, which is Death Touch and Bug type.
Beautiful.
So that's the creatures of the deck. So then we have some of the support cards, like Absorb Sunlight. When it comes into play, you put a +1/+1 counter on all of your creatures, which can be very helpful if you have a bug army. And it also has Pokemon Master. So if you have a Pokemon with evolution, which Abbey has plenty of, like Arcanine, Charizard, and Kakuna.
Even Charmeleon's an evolution.
Charmeleon's it's a very cheap evolution. Then you can continue to grow all of your guys. Yes. And then we have Strength, which is an enchantment, and whenever enchanted creature attacks, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So it can be kind of a more fragile way to boost your army, but it's decent in a pinch. And also, if you have Pokemon Master, when it comes into play, you draw a card. So it kind of replaces itself as well.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a card I would normally play in a deck. Like, if I was drafting especially, I wouldn't pick it. But in this deck in particular, it does work really nicely in a pinch, like you said. So that's why I like having it in there.
Yeah. All right, and then for some more removal, we have Flamethrower. Just deals X damage to target creature. Thunderbolt, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another creature. And with Pokemon Master, it deals double that damage instead. And then lastly, we have Takedown. Target creature you control gets +1/+1 and fights another creature. And if you have Pokemon Master, it gets +3/+3 instead.
Ooh, nasty.
Yes. And then last one, Twin Needle, which just creates some more bugs.
Yeah.
And then, of course, filling out the deck, we have all of these lands.
Beautiful.
We have some, like we said in the intro, some of the common dual lands. We have a Pokemon Center, which is like an Evolving Wilds. And that's the main deck. And then in the sideboard, we just have some Artifact and Enchantment Hate. We have Sandshrew, which you can sacrifice to destroy an artifact. You can have to use white, red, or green mana to do it, but Abbey should have no problem with that.
Oh, I have absolutely no problem with that.
We have Throw Rock, like you do in the Safari Zone.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite cards, too.
Yeah, and lets you destroy an artifact or enchantment, or a creature with flying, because, you kill 2 birds with 1 rock.
Yeah, exactly.
And then lastly, we have Earthquake, which lets you destroy an artifact or land, and it also deals 1 damage to each creature. So this was kind of some anti-bug tech as well, but Abbey probably won't be using this second mode on it very often if she sideboards it in.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So that's Bugs and Fires. Now let's take a look at the deck I'll be using.
Yeah.
All right, this is the deck I will be playing, Esper Control.
Ooh.
So since Abbey went with black and red for her color choices, I decided to take the 3 leftover colors, black, white, and blue. Since I really like playing the slower controlling decks in this format, I'd basically play it with whatever colors were left over, but white, blue, and black are 3 colors that I'm very happy to have, and we'll kind of see why as we go through the deck.
Yeah, you love decks like this. Yeah. This is your bread and butter right here.
Tasty. So one of the things that you'll notice right away that we're starting off with are the badges, which is kind of another mini mechanic in the set that we didn't really go over in the intro, but it's what makes the decks that don't have grass types, so the non-green decks, able to play big dudes faster, potentially. So we'll take a look at Gary's Earth Badge here, which says you can add an amount of white or black mana to your mana pool equal to the number of badges you control. So if you have 1 badge, you get 1 or the other. If you have 2 badges, like Janine's Soul Badge here, then suddenly each badge adds 2 mana. And if you have 3 badges out, like Sabrina's Marsh Badge here, then suddenly each badge adds 3 mana. So it's like you're accumulating more badges, and you're becoming a Pokemon Master, suddenly casting big things like Blastoise here.
Oh, God.
Yes, you've been on the receiving end of a Blastoise.
Oh, have I ever.
So Blastoise is kind of like Charizard, where it costs 8 mana, and it's a big dude. Has Water type. When it comes into play, you draw a card and discard a card. Evolves Squirtle and Wartortle. And also, whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return another target creature to its owner's hands. It's kind of blasting them with Hydro Pump.
Bam.
All right, and then next for the creatures, we have Firo here, who's kind of another one of those premier uncommon gold cards. Costs 7, it's 5/4 flyer, and it has normal type. So when it comes into play, you gain 4 life, equal to its toughness. So a kind of nice dude for attacking in the air and stabilizing if you get behind a bit. Then we have Ghastly, 2/1 flying ghost type. I think we saw him in the intro video, so he's kind of a nice little 2-for-1 against aggressive decks.
We did, yeah. Ghastly is one of my favorites too, even though I don't really play Ghastly very often, but especially in drafts, Ghastly is one of my favorites because, if it does have the ghost type, if it dies, which it can die very easily, then you can just counter, get rid of one of your opponent's Pokemon. So it's very nice.
Yes, you like making your opponents feel bad no matter what.
Yeah.
Next we have Kingler. 6 mana, 6/4 with Hexproof and Water type. Then we have Krabby, who evolves into Kingler. It's just kind of a smaller version. It's a 3/1 Hexproof. Then we have,
Mewtwo.
The Mythic in my deck. Abby has Moltres, and I have Mewtwo. It costs 10 mana, which is a lot. But with these badges, again, it's not too hard to get out of Mewtwo. And it's a 7/7 flying Psychic type, so when it comes into play, I look at the top card of my library, and I can either keep it there or put it in my graveyard. Then it has this giant text right here, but essentially what it does is when it comes into play, I return a card from my graveyard to my hand. And then, up to one target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn, and I gain control of a permanent with converted mana cost X or less, where X is the converted mana cost of the return card. So when Mewtwo comes into play, basically you get the best card back from your graveyard, you kill one of your opponent's creatures, and you gain control of something of theirs. So he's great at any point in the game if you can cast him at 10 mana.
Exactly, that's the catch. I mean, he's fantastic, but the casting, like, for 10 mana, that cost is just so high, you know?
We'll see if he comes out in our games or
He
not.
probably will. You do have those badges.
But so kind of rounding out the more early plays in the deck, the 1-cost spell is Poliwag, which has Water type, and it's a 0/3, so it's a nice little blocker, also kind of helps sift through your deck. But also, if you get him in the later game, you can just pay 3 mana instead of discarding a card to Poliwag's Water type. So you can just pay 4 mana total, he just comes into play, draws a card, basically. Then we have the evolution of that, Poliwhirl, which does the same thing. You may pay 2 mana instead of discarding a card to his Water type. So he's good kind of in the mid-game at 4 if you just want to sift through cards in your hand that you don't want, and in the late game where he just draws a card and he's a good blocker. Then we have Psyduck, who is a Psychic type and a Water type. So when it comes into play, you can look at the top card of your library, either leave it there or put it in your graveyard, and draw a card and discard a card. So very good at kind of sifting through your deck, getting to the cards that you need.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we have Spearow, which evolves into Fearow that we saw earlier, just a 3/2 flying normal type, good blocker in the air if we need that. Squirtle evolves into Blastoise and Wartortle, as we see here. And then we also have Staryu, which is quietly one of my favorite cards in the set. It's just a 1/2 Water type for 5, but when it enters the battlefield, you can return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand.
Oh, God.
So it really allows for some tricky plays with instants and sorceries. Speaking of which, let's take a look at some of those now. We have Body Slam, destroy an attacking or blocking creature, and you gain 3 life if you have Pokemon Master.
Yeah, Body Slam is one of my favorite cards, too. It's super, super helpful in a draft as well.
Yeah, because it's one of those cards where oftentimes I'll have 4 mana open, and you're like, oh, do I attack? Do I not?
Yep, and then I don't, and then, it's just a mess.
Yes, it's a good mind game card. Then we have Disable, which is just a counter spell for 3 mana, but costs 1 less if you have Pokemon Master. And Fissure, which destroys a creature and costs 3 less if you control a creature with evolution. So those are the instants and some sorceries. Another one of my favorite cards in the deck and the whole set is Psychic. So as an additional cost to cast Psychic, you exile X cards from your graveyard. All creatures get -X/-X until end of turn.
So good.
So it wipes the board, gets rid of all those pesky little bugs that Abbey will be putting there.
No.
And it really works well with the Water type, which lets you draw a card and discard a card, and the Psychic types, which lets you put the card from top of your library into your graveyard potentially. So you fill up your graveyard pretty quickly, and you can Psychic for a lot.
Exactly.
Same thing with Revive here, where you can either return a creature with evolution from your graveyard to your hand, or a creature without evolution from your graveyard to the hand. You'll be filling up your graveyard very quickly with this deck, and can get 2 good cards back most of the time. And lastly, we have Sludge, which is just another kind of modal removal spell. You can give something -1/-1. You can give something -2/-2. You can give 2 things, -1/-1 and -2/-2, or you can give 1 thing, -3/-3, -3/-3. So it's a very flexible removal spell like that. And then lastly, we just have a bunch of lands to round it out, a couple common dual lands, and that's the deck. I don't really have a sideboard because my deck is perfect as it is. So.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. All right, so what do you say we slam these decks together and see what happens?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go.